All right, this is episode 2. So last episode was the inaugural deer episode, bigger picture stuff. So everything from like picking terrain to help you pick a state and kind of talk about goals that you want, to talk tags. That was very big picture stuff. So we ended last week talking about timing. You mentioned you like to go during the rut, which is super original. But say you landed on a place like Wisconsin or Kentucky, places, actually we spent a bit of time in both those states, good tag availability, not too far away from Michigan, definitely known to have good deer. And I'm saying things not to give away to be like a spot burner. Like these states as a whole are good. You can figure out from there. But Jared, like, what are you doing? Like, you got the state picked, picture Kentucky, other than hunting around the Bourbon Trail. Like, what are you gonna do?
The Bourbon Trail's not a bad place to go.
It's not. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Let's use Kentucky as an example. If I'm looking at the whole state of Kentucky, and there usually when you look at a map, it's kind of lit up with green where you can see public, and you can turn on all the layerings on your maps and figure that all out. I'm looking, okay, if we go to the west side of the state and we hunt, A, B, and C acreage, what do they have? Do I have enough kind of flexibility to kind of move around that way and pop into these other areas? And then how far, like, I'd start thinking about logistics and transportation and just having kind of a backup plan. But I want to really focus on those highly densified areas of public land.
Yeah.
Like, if on the east side of the state, you only got one big chunk and the other side has, a couple of them split up. I mean, I still know that a lot of these hunters are still going to these places 50-50. So now I've got 50% of the population that I will probably have to compete against, but it's not like one central location where everybody's going to.
Yeah.
So I just want to have options.
Yeah, I like that too, because one thing we've found to work to our advantage is, like, when you have a lot of places you can go, like if a place sucks or there's people there or something happens that just kind of ruins the area, like you can quick pivot. And to have that mindset through all this training, all this like stuff we're talking about, all these questions, it's like to have like a flexibility about you is huge. Like that's probably one of the more important things we can talk about in this entire series. I would say too, what I like to do, and we've done this a bit when we go out of state, is we'll find areas of land that we like and we'll start crossing off places where people go or places we don't like and almost narrow down the area of size that we're going to be looking at. So whether it's, spots by the road or spots where you see a bunch of people or spots that are like just pressured in a bad way, we kind of start Xing those off, and we'll even do that right on our OnX map, draw lines or whatever to kind of just make this spot smaller and smaller. It's just try to hone in. So as we're doing that though, I guess the question I would have, and if I were listening, I would have is like, how do you start researching then these specific areas within the state? So you've kind of found it's like, I like the west side of the state or whatever. I like these regions. Like, what are you doing next? Where are you getting your information? Quick shout out to another amazing sponsor of ours, Kifaru International. If you're like us and love hunting in some of the toughest places, you know how crucial having the right gear is. Kifaru makes some of the toughest, most reliable backpacks and tents out there, and it's all made right here in America. Whether you're hunting in the backcountry or headed to your favorite deer stand, Kifaru has you covered. Keep your eyes out this year, especially as they're launching a ton of amazing new products like the new Arc frame that just came out. So next time you gear up for an adventure, make sure to check out Kifaru International.
Sure. So I'll use an example of here in Michigan, the Manistee National Forest.
Mm-hmm.
It's right in the middle of the state on the west side. Tons of public land up there. And within there's kind of other like state game areas. And a great way to find information on all this stuff is just cruising for like forums or Facebook groups. Some people will have that on there, and just see if you can get invited into these groups and just have a conversation with people. Because most of the time hunters want to help out other hunters, but there are some that kind of like to keep their spots. So it's respectable. They've worked hard to try to find that, and they've dialed it in, and they want you to kind of go in there and learn it too, just like they have. So don't go in there with the mindset that everyone's going to tell you their best spots, but they may say, hey, maybe avoid this area of this area, game area because X, Y, and Z. You know, maybe they've had a bad experience there and they just want to pass that along. So it's just, I've actually had good experience doing that. I think it was when we went to Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
We had talked to a couple of people on rock slide, and they're kind of like, hey, if you guys go and camp at this area, you'll have access to, you know, this river, to this ag field.
Yeah, we did.
The more mountainous, hilly areas. And he's like, it's just a great kind of a hub and spoke that you can go to and just punch out.
An organic nearby farm there too. Yeah, that's exactly right. And like things we've talked about before, it's like nearby land for sale. You know, we've called almost every time we go anywhere, I'll call the biologist and just be like, hey, you know, we just did this with the hunt we're planning for mountain goat with Joe. Calls and just talked to a biologist, found out the area he's heading to has great minerals, and so it's why it grows great sheep, and it's why they're healthy and whatever else. So it's like those kind of things can set apart an area just by just doing a little bit more research, just being a little bit more creative in your problem solving. OnX is the title sponsor of our podcast here at the Fair Chase, and it's a must-have app for all of us who love to explore the outdoors. Whether you're hunting or hiking or fly fishing, OnX gives you detailed, accurate maps right at your fingertips. With property boundaries, topographical features, and trail data, you'll always know where you are and where you're headed. You'll also likely be able to figure out where that big buck is headed to. Plus, their offline maps mean you're covered even in the most remote locations. OnX is the ultimate tool for outdoor navigation, making every adventure safer and more enjoyable. Download OnX today and explore with confidence. You know, you mentioned all this. You mentioned rock slide and stuff. What tools are you using for this kind of research?
Everything I can get my hands on.
Yeah,
I'm looking at Google Maps. I'm looking at OnX. I'm looking at every kind of map that I can find because I'm not there. I can't just drive over there and just check it out. Mm-hmm. So like, I've even shown you a couple of Google Maps, and it's like, holy cow, you can see deer trails down there. Yeah, but I've never seen this on this other map. And, you know, the different maps, the different layers, all this different stuff that you can compile together and almost even overlay each other on maybe one specific area. You're like, okay, well, this map's showing this. Maybe that one's a couple years old, but this new one's showing like a huge clear cut over here. Like you would have never known that if you just kind of zeroed in on one map or one piece of information. Like if you can pull everything in, you're gonna be way better off.
Well, and we've even we'll go to state websites, and like, so Michigan, a good example, we have like private land that's designated as public that you can hunt, and there'll be maps of that too. It's like another area that you can find that maybe not everybody's looking at. Those hunter access properties, or states, you know, have different names for them. Okay, so you've used OnX to find kind of the area. You found a spot that's promising. What are you looking at next? Like, how are you even narrowing it down further?
See, that's like the favorite part of the trip.
Yeah.
Right? You've zoned in everything. You've collected all the information. Like, this is the area that you're going to, and now you can start to pick out your spots.
Yeah.
Like, this is where you're looking for food source, bedding, travel routes, draws in hillsides, saddles, bridges, all this different stuff. And you just start start placing pins like, oh, that looks good, that looks good, that looks good. And then, like you were saying earlier, crossing out those areas that you think people are going to be at, because it might open up maybe a little area that you didn't think of before. I was doing this down in some state land by my house, actually. I had never been to this area, even though I live maybe 20 minutes away. And I was looking at the aerial map of it, and I just start plotting pins. Okay, that's like a corner of a field. I'll just throw a pin down there. There's like an edge of a swamp to like some oak trees where I'll throw one down there. And then once you do that, I threw on my topo map, and everything changed. Like, oh, that spot sucks. I'm going to chuck that out. That one's sweet because it's right in the middle of a draw. It's coming from bedding, going to food. Like, having those tools as an asset just can help. It's just crazy how much it helps. But with not being able to go and drive there. You know
right.
what I mean?
If you have to look only on a map, you're trying to get as much information to lay on top of each other as possible. This episode is also brought to you by Tuo Gear, innovators in technical hunting clothing. 2O is a newer company. It's based right here in Michigan. And whether you're hunting elk in the mountains or chasing antelope in the plains or traipsing through swamps after that ruddy buck, 2O has you covered with premium jackets and pants, merino wool layers, everything you could possibly need to stay comfortable in the woods. Their products are engineered for functionality and durability, ensuring you stay protected in any conditions. Plus, their camo is really effective. We're big fans. So don't take our word for it, though. Go to 2ogear.com and check it out. Are you thinking about hunting pressure and all this? Like, is that in your mind yet or not too much? Or
Yeah, I can, for the most part, identify areas that will have a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you see a 2-track going through this public area, like probably 500 yards on either side is probably a good place not to go, generally, right?
Yeah.
Some people hunt on the road because they think everyone else moves too far. So it's really all your perspective on what's good and what's not. But like, if you, again, 2-track scenario, you got one going into the middle of state land with like a turnaround, somewhere in that area of that circumference around that turnaround area is not going to be.
There's probably going to be some trash, used condoms, and you like the rib cage of a deer from years past, right? Yeah. That's just like, it's classic public land spot. No, I know what you mean. That being said, like last year was out and just talking about human pressure, there are like topographical or like terrain features that prohibit movement too. So like crossing a creek doesn't even need to be that far in, but to cross a creek's kind of a pain. You need some hip waders or whatever, or just be willing to get wet. And most people, that will cut down. And like, if you can stack like a creek and a hill and this, last year I shot a deer on a very accessible, where I was, I'll just say it was very accessible. But to get to this very accessible spot, or that was very nice for walking, you had to climb a giant hill. Like you had to first go in a quarter mile, climb a giant hill, and then it's just easy sailing, right? And so many people don't do that. So I get up in the morning. It's November 1. I get out, daylight it's already daylight. Had to get the kid off to practice or whatever, and I'm making my way out. I'm like, I'm gonna go with my binoculars. I brought my bibs. I was gonna hunker down and just kind of glass from afar. On my walk in, sure enough, you walk up this hill, people hadn't been out, and there's a buck making a rub. As I crest the hill right there, drop to a knee, end up shooting him at like 12 yards. But like, again, he kind of felt safe there because people didn't make that walk out, which is crazy to me. But it's just hot. You're walking a long ways. All right, so we're talking zoning in on an area, right? As we end this episode, any final thoughts on how you zero in, or like any tips for people as they're kind of, it's easy to say all these big picture things, but it's hard. It's totally different for every time everybody does it themselves.
I would say one of the hardest things to do while you're on the hunt is to switch gears. Like when you've put in so much time and effort on one area with like 50 pins and you're like, this is it. This is where we're going to go. We're going to kill a buck. But like if you get there and it's all blown up with, I don't know, ATV riders or bird hunters, you don't know what's going on there. Like you got to be able to switch gears and go someplace else. So like being flexible and having a backup plan and all these different things is huge to success. Because like, again, when you get there and you find out, oh, we can't really hunt here, you had all that anticipation of even just getting there, and all of a sudden it's, well, now what are we going to do? But if you have a backup plan, like, oh, okay, now we can go here and check out this area. Let's go and do that. Just being flexible.
Yeah, we've gotten that wrong, you and I, a few times. You get to a spot and you're like locked in. It's like, what do you do now? Okay, this is helpful. We've zeroed kind of in. I think next week we'll come back and we'll talk about scouting. Like you got your spot, you want to narrow down even further.